friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 29th of April and we are going to deal with three very important topics which are in news. Planet's plastic problem. Well, this problem is not new and this problem is rising. This problem has impacted one and all, whether it be the marine ecosystem, the terrestrial ecosystem, whether the humans, the animals, or the trees or plants. Plastics do not decompose or they take very long to decompose. And in all this, we do not have a global treaty on that. People from all across the world have gathered multiple times, and this is the fourth meeting which is happening in Canada right now. The fifth meeting, which will happen by the end of this year, may try to finalize a global treaty on the use of plastics. This treaty has met various opposition also, particularly from the fossil fuel producing countries, which are key components in producing of plastics and using its byproducts. So let us see what happens with this regard. Next is Climate Technology Center and Network. Now this is basically a technical arm of the UNFCCC. It basically undertakes all the technicalities related to climate change. It recommends possible technical solutions to the countries all across the world, whether developed, developing, or underdeveloped, with respect to climate change. Now, this Climate Technology Center and Network has completed 10 years of its existence. This has done phenomenal work in the previous 10 years and expected to do more work in the times to come because climate change as a challenge is increasing day by day. Next is, what can Election Commission of India do if elections are disrupted? Elections can be disrupted due to multiple, I would say, factors. Suppose EVMs are taken away by some people, booth capturing is done, or a natural disaster happens, or if the candidate who is contesting the polls dies. In all these cases, the Election Commission of India has backup plans. And these backup plans were into picture when in Manipur, some 11 polling stations were attacked and re-elections were conducted. So the options Election Commission of India has with itself according to the Representation of People's Act, and it acts accordingly. After all, conducting free and fair elections is the utmost responsibility of the Election Commission of India. Now we will look into the details. Planet's plastic problem. Plastic waste is everywhere. If you talk about Mount Everest, the peak of Mount Everest, you will find it. If you talk about the lowest point, that is, the oceanic surfaces, you will find it over there. You will find them inside the air body of animals, birds, and in human blood and breast milk as well. Now, from April 23 till April 29, thousands of negotiators and observers from 175 countries have arrived in Ottawa, that is Canada, and they want to discuss a treaty, a global treaty for curbing plastic pollution. Treaty has not been finalized. This is being discussed. The question is that have they met for the first time in Ottawa to discuss this treaty? Actually, no, this is the fourth round of negotiations since 2022. 2022, we started the negotiations, and this is the fourth round of negotiations in Ottawa. The final round will be in South Korea this year, and hopefully after this final round, this treaty will be adopted, the global treaty, which is going to be the first ever treaty on plastic pollution or regulating the manufacturing and consumption of plastics all across the world. Now, why a global plastics treaty is needed? The answer is simple. The plastic production and consumption is on the rise. Now here we have a graph. Since 1950s, the plastic production across the world has skyrocketed. It increased from 2 million tons in 1950 to 450 million tons in 2019. Now this is 225 times more, 450 million tons in 2019. So 1950 to 2019, the population did not grow 225 times, but the plastic production and consumption grew. And this is expected to go further by 2050. By 2050, it is expected that 1.2 billion tons of plastics will be produced and consumed. And what will happen after the consumption? It will end up in waste. Now, what is the impact of plastic waste? That also should be known. Now, much of this plastic waste is getting leaked into the environment, especially into rivers and oceans, where it breaks down into smaller particles, microplastic or nanoplastics, but it does not decompose. It breaks down, and that smaller, I would say, breakdown or presence of plastics in smaller, I would say, sizes. Like nanoplastics is of the size of 10 raised to power 9 meters, and microplastics 10 raised to power minus 5 meters. So this is smaller than this, and the smaller it gets, the harmful it gets. Now, here is this table. Plastic waste generated 353 million. Out of this 353 million, 82 million entered or was mismanaged and littered plastic waste. It is lying here and there. 19 million tons is leaked into the environment. 6 million tons is leaked into the rivers and coasts, and 1.7 million tons is transported to the oceans from the rivers and the coasts. So this is causing a lot of problem all across the world. And by 2050, the projections are that the production and consumption will increase. Now, this production and increased production and consumption will lead to an increased burden also to tackle this waste. Now, the connection between plastics and climate change, obviously there is a connection. The production and disposal are also contributing to climate change. See, plastic production, basically 90% of the emissions which are coming out of the plastic domain. Means if I consider plastics as an entity, plastics generated 1.8 billion tons of greenhouse gases emissions, which is 3.4% of the global emissions. Out of this 1.8 billion tons of greenhouse gases emitted due to plastics, 90% is coming from plastic manufacturing, plastic production, because this plastic production uses fossil fuels as raw materials. Now, if current trends continue, emissions from the production could grow by 20% by 2050. So, emissions will also increase, means the increased usage of plastics will also lead to increased global warming or climate change. This is the connection between plastics and climate change. Now, what can the treaty entail, or what should the treaty entail? What are the possibilities? While none of the treaty's details have currently been finalized, they are under discussion. Experts believe that it can go beyond just putting a cap on plastic production in UN member states. Now, the treaty can theoretically lay out guidelines on how rich nations should help poorer ones to meet the plastic reduction targets. It may also ban particular types of plastic products, and chemical additives which are used in the plastics. Treaty can mandate testing of certain chemicals. It can also have some details on just transition for waste pickers, because waste pickers whose livelihood depends upon picking up plastic waste, since plastic usage will be reduced, then what will happen to the livelihood of these waste pickers? So this transition from plastic to less plastic or no plastic should also undertake their concerns into mind, means the treaty should entail their concerns as well. There are certain supporters of this treaty and certain opposers. First, we will talk about the opposers of this treaty. Some of the biggest oil and gas producing countries are the opposers of this treaty. Basically they have been finding out various ways to stall the progress in the adoption of the treaty. This kind of, I would say, methodology is being used by them. Why them? Because see, these oil exporting countries, first of all, a lot of oil is used in plastic manufacturing. Second of all, one of the byproducts of oil industry is also used in plastic manufacturing. So it will definitely hamper their, I would say, income. Then on the other hand, there is a coalition of around 65 nations known as the High Ambition Coalition, HAC, which seeks to tackle plastic production. Now, as a task, you have to find out that is India part of this High Ambition Coalition and is USA part of this High Ambition Coalition. These two countries you have to find out. This definitely has African nations, and most of the European Union countries are also there in this High Ambition Coalition. Also wants to end plastic pollution by 2040. So let us see what or how this global, I would say, treaty gets adopted, because there are certain challenges in this treaty. The opposers are there. Next is the factual news. Climate Technology Center and Network. Why it was a news? Because it's completed, or 10 years of its completion. It celebrated 10 years of its completion. CTCN, which stands for Climate Technology Center and Network, is the operational arm of UNFCCC, that is United Nations Framework Convention to Combat Climate Change. Hosted by United Nations Environment Program in collaboration with United Nations Industrial Development Organization, which is UNIDO, with the support of 11 other independent organizations having expertise in climate technologies. Now, as the name suggests, Climate Technology Center. This center has it is basically a knowledge hub of all the technologies which can be instrumental in tackling climate change. So that is there, and let us look into the purpose, which will make things more clear. Purpose of CTCN was established to accelerate the development and transfer of environmentally sound technologies for low carbon and climate resilient development. Transfer means those who develop this technology to the ones who want to use it. So that can be transferred via CTCN. It provides technology solutions, capacity building, and advice on policy, legal, and regulatory frameworks. And it is a demand-driven mechanism, means you generate the demand, you keep your demand with CTCN. Whatever, if CTCN has this technology, CTCN will provide you, or CTCN will promote the development of that kind of technology to find solutions for you guys. So this is basically the purpose of this organization. Structure of CTCN. A center is there, a coordinating entity located at UN City, Copenhagen, and a worldwide network of organizations that deliver CTCN services both virtually and actually, means physically. So this is how CTCN functions or operates. Now the last piece of news, that what can election commission do if elections are disrupted? Elections can be disrupted due to multiple, I would say, reasons. So Election Commission of India under section 58(2) and 58(a)(2) of the Representation of Peoples Act 1951 declared void the poll on April 19 in 11 polling stations of Manipur and 8 polling stations of Arunachal Pradesh. Why it declared the elections at those polling stations void? Because there were some instances of violence over there. Repolling was conducted April 22 and April 24. April 22 in Manipur and April 24 in Arunachal Pradesh. Elections were also adjourned in Madhya Pradesh's Betul Lok Sabha constituency. Why? Because there was a death of candidate on April 9. The polling originally scheduled on April 26 will now be held on May 7th. So this is, I would say, the reasons, or these are the list of the reasons why we are studying this topic. Now let us see circumstances of polling disruptions. And if these disruptions happen, then repolling will be ordered, as was done by the Election Commission of India in Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh, or Madhya Pradesh, as we saw in the last slide. Circumstances of polling disruptions. First is intentional destruction, taking away of EVMs. Now, section 58 of the RPA, fresh polls in case of destruction, etc. of ballot boxes, the EC can declare the poll at a polling station to be void if an unauthorized person has unlawfully taken away EVMs, any EVM have been accidentally or intentionally destroyed or lost or damaged or tampered with, and a mechanical failure develops in any EVM during the recording of the votes. So in all these cases, Election Commission of India will equate this situation with disruption, and repolling will happen. Booth capturing. In case of booth capturing, section 135A of the Representation of Peoples Act says that seizure of a polling station affecting the conduct of elections, taking possession of polling station, allowing only his or their supporters to vote, intimidating or threatening any elector, seizure of a counting place where counting happens, and involvement of any person in government service in any of the above activities will be equivalent to booth capturing. Booth capturing was quite common in the early years of, I would say, Indian democracy, but now it has become a rare phenomenon. Booth capturing is punishable for a term of not less than 1 year, which may extend to 3 years for lay people, and not less than 3 years, extending to 5 years for government servants. So if government servants are involved, then for them the punishment is even higher. Options with the Election Commission to counter booth capturing. The Election Commission can take the following measures in case of booth capturing. First is declare the poll at that polling station to be void and direct a fresh poll on a new date. Declare that poll at that polling station where booth capturing has happened. Then countermand the elections in the constituency. In the entire constituency, the elections can be, proved void in case booth capturing has taken place in a large number of polling stations in that constituency, or if it has affected the counting of votes. So in that case, in the entire constituency, the elections will be void and elections will happen. If, in a few places, 1 or 2 places in a constituency, booth capturing incidents have happened, then in only those areas or those households whose polling station was that, in that particular polling station, repolling will happen. Natural disasters. This is the third situation. First situation was When EVMs are tampered with, second situation is booth capturing, third situation is natural disaster. Now, the presiding officer of a polling station can adjourn the poll at a polling station under section 57(1) of the Representation of People's Act in case of a natural calamity like flood, severe storm, non-receipt or loss or damage to essential polling materials like EVM, electoral roll, etc., interruption or obstruction due to any riot or open violence, non-arrival of the polling party due to obstruction or any other serious difficulty, and non-commencement of the poll within the 2 hours from the scheduled time due to malfunctioning of EVM or any other reason. Now, after seeking the Election Commission's approval on the date and hours, the adjourned poll will recommence from the stage at which it was left immediately before adjournment. So basically, let's suppose the polling has started and it is 12 noon, and at that time severe storms come, then the polling will be stopped, and whatever the date will be announced by the Election Commission of India for repolling, only those people who have not voted on that day till 12 noon will be allowed to vote. And let's suppose the voting was from 8 a.m. in the morning till 6 p.m. in the evening. So at 12 noon the disruption was there. So from 12 to 6 only voting will happen for 6 hours. Means the remaining of all the procedures will be done on that day. Death of a candidate. Now, as per section 52 of RPA, which is amended in 1996, the poll shall be adjourned only in the case of the death of a recognized political party's candidate. Recognized political party means either a party should be a state party or a national party. In case of the death of a non-recognized candidate, then repolling will not be done. The above provision applies if the candidate with a valid nomination dies at any time after 11 a.m. on the last date for making nominations until the commencement of the polls. So let's suppose the polls are scheduled on 10th May and the window for making nomination was from 8th April till 15th April. Just imaginary situation. On this time period, you can file the nominations. Now on the last day, that is 15th of April, after 11 a.m. on 15th of April, from here till here, if the candidate dies, then re-elections will be there. Now what happened in Betul? In Betul, the candidate's death occurred one day after the last day for withdrawing candidature. Means of nomination, this is the last day of nomination. The one day after this, that candidate died. Therefore, the polls are adjourned over there and a new date has been announced by the Election Commission of India. What if the death happens after polling? This has also happened in Muradabad this year. Muradabad is in UP. In the Muradabad Lok Sabha constituency, the candidate died after voting. Means pollings happened and after that, the candidate died. Now, in this case, what will happen? If that candidate wins, counting will happen, and only if that candidate is a winner, then a by-election will be held if that person emerges as a winner. If that person is losing, then no by-elections. But if that person wins, then a by-election, because polling had already happened over there. Now comes the last part, that is the MCQs. Now, which of the following can be the impacts of plastic pollution? First is it can cause cancer in humans. Second is it can disturb hormonal balance of humans. And third is it can increase marine pollution. Only 3, 1 and 3, 2 and 3, all of the above. Now, I've picked up this kind of question after a while now. That is assertion and reasoning. The assertion statement is plastics contribute to 3.4% of global GHG emissions. GHG stands for greenhouse gases. Reasoning is plastic production uses fossil fuels in production process. Both A and R are true or correct, and R is the correct explanation of it. Both A and R are correct, and R is not the correct explanation of it. A is true, R is false, A is false, R is true. Which of the following 4 options best fits over here? Which of the following bodies hosts the Climate Technology Center and Network? UNFCCC, second is UNIDO, third is UNDP, and fourth option is both B and C. Answer it carefully. What happens if death of a candidate contesting polls dies post-polling? There will be by-elections irrespective of the result. Elections will be called off and repolling will happen. The Election Commission will ask another candidate to replace the dead candidate if the deceased has won. No re-elections will take place. And last is none of the above. Which of the following statements is correct in this scenario? Then consider the statements and mark the correct one. Elections will continue from the point it is stopped due to natural disasters. In case of booth capturing in a polling station in a particular constituency, ECI will order repolling in the entire constituency. Which of these statements is true? Or maybe both are true, then you have to answer that accordingly. Now with this, I come to an end of today's session. I will be meeting you tomorrow now with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys very well know what to do. Keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.